Investigations are still ongoing into the failures of Operation Odin Sword.
Failed mission resulted in the death of 12 Navy SEALs.
Lieutenant Commander James Reese, can you outline the details of your mission?
They knew we were coming.
According to audio logs, you went dark on comms roughly 4 mics in. Why?
That's not how.
Really great series, and it's really well written. Very methodical. The characters are really well developed. And my friend Jack CARR, who is the brains behind all of this, New York Times best-selling author for his latest book, which we had him on to talk about, In the Blood, which is the latest in the James Reese series. He joins us now because July 1st is when Terminal List premiered on Amazon Prime. If you haven't watched this series, you should. I think it is the best series on streaming right now. It is so well done, so good. I don't have a complaint. It's just really well done. Not that I would complain, but congratulations just on another feat in a new medium.
Well, thank you so much. It's been crazy. The response to it, not just in the U.S., but around the world, is off the charts. On the audience side of the house, critic side, not so much, but that was to be expected.
It's not, it's not made for them. As you said, it's made for the people in the arena. Because I saw the Rotten Tomatoes thing. It was like, whenever Rotten Tomatoes has something rated horribly, I know I'm going to love it. Because the audience rating was like 90-something%. And Rotten Tomatoes, unless it's some fuddy-duddy art house thing, they're not going to be into it. But I know that there was some, if you have the typical people, if it's not woke enough, if it's not, this, but that's not, you write what you did. This is, recalls so much of your experience, but also it's telling the story of this character. So I don't know why wokery has to be involved in this at all. It's silly.
Yep. It's like if it's not shoved in there and forced in there, they're still upset, even if it's just not one way or the other. It's just a story. Like there's no conservative, liberal, right, left, Republican, Democrat. None of that is mentioned in the show at all. But just because it's not, and it's not mentioned in a way that is favorable to that agenda, then they just get very upset. And it's interesting on the critical side because this is definitely a different show than other ones out there. Yeah. It's not like plug and play action movie where it's just straight up action or straight up revenge. It's really different in the way it's done. So I think if it had maybe some of that other stuff, that other agenda forced in there, maybe they'd love it. But then the audience score would be about a 0. So
it would obliterate your suspension of disbelief because I think you do a really good job. In your books, I thought you did a really good job, and we have the original Terminal List too. I thought you did a really good job of putting the reader in it, and I was really interested to see how this story was going to transpose to screens, and you really do feel like you're right in there. And even though James Reese is a total badass, there's still parts of him that it's weird because you can identify with some aspect of him, definitely his family at any point, and it really puts you right in there. So all of that stuff would have just been a hurdle, which I'm sure you were very sensitive to.
Oh yeah, and a lot of it's so personal. So I try to detach myself, but then I see the scene in the first episode where James Reese comes home and opens the door and quietly shuts it behind him, and then sees his wife and daughter for the first time in months. And I got that in the book from an actual homecoming that I had, where I came home and I saw them through the little stained glass portion of the window, and then so it was very similar to what I experienced in real life. But I think it also speaks to a lot of people that come home, and especially the next morning scene where he's trying to kind of get to know his wife and daughter again at breakfast. It's one of my favorite scenes actually in the whole series. And so many veterans have reached out to me and said that particular scene of James Reese trying to reconnect, but not really being there, thinking about what happened, thinking about downrange still, trying to make some sort of a conversation with his wife and daughter, that really hit home for them. So, I've heard from a lot of people that was powerful for them.
We're talking with Jack CARR, New York Times bestselling author of Terminal List, and of course the James Reese series. And that scene, and there was I don't want to give away too much. I just think I'll just say this. There was one particular scene that involved some other people who are serving and were looking for him, and he places a round on a rock, and that signifies a shot that he didn't take. I was unaware of that, and that's actually a thing. Talk to me about this, because it's things like this that maybe take up, a minute of the story or a page in the book that really really put you right in there. Talk to me about that a little bit, though, if you can.
Yeah, so that one came from something in real life that happened to me in a shot I didn't take as a sniper. And in the book, I fictionalize it and call it Fallujah. In real life, it was in Najaf, Iraq, back in the summer of 2004. But I weave that into the storyline because I talked about that with my platoons and troops ever since that, talking about, you are the last person in this line of decision makers that starts with the president and weaves its way all the way down to you, that 18 to, let's say, 28, 30-year-old person who is on the trigger deciding whether you're going to press that trigger back and take a life or not. So it goes all the way down from the top. And I talk about a shot that I didn't take and how I sleep very well because I didn't take that shot. So we have to be decision makers out there on the battlefield at that tactical level. We're the last decision makers in that chain. But then also in the story, there's another part farther on where James Reese can clack off an ambush in the book and kill a bunch of people that are coming after him. And he sees somebody because he's on this revenge mission without constraint, and he sees somebody that he recognizes, and he doesn't do it. Thank goodness. And that really essentially saves him. Yeah. So in the movie or in the series, we changed that up and we put a bullet right there so that they know that he had them in his sights and he could have pressed that trigger, but he didn't.
I love the reverent reaction of everyone involved. They're like, oh my gosh, and they knew it. And it was just they were just so well done. I wanted to ask you, talking with Jack CARR, New York Times bestselling author, Terminalist. He's got the series out on Amazon Prime, which if you haven't binged it, you should have already watched it. And let me ask you a quick question on that. Do you favor like one episode release per week, or do you like it all at once?
I think it depends on the show. For this, all at once, for sure, was the way to go. But I kind of think it's if you have a fan base already, how much excitement, how much advertising marketing is in play. So I think there's a lot of different things at play there. But for something like this, all at once, 8 episodes, so you can watch it as an 8-hour movie, was the way to go. And so many people binged it in 8 hours.
Oh, yeah.
But as a movie. We filmed it as one big movie, and they should watch it. When someone reaches out to me and says they're watching it on their phone, I'm always like, no, because we filmed it for like a gigantic screen. So the biggest screen you can find to watch it on is the way to go. But I think 8 hours is the way to go because people like to binge these days, especially something that's coming out 4th of July weekend, or let's say Memorial Day weekend or something like that. And you have these 3 days and people are going to be at home barbecuing and having fun, and boom, now you can just binge this thing. You don't have to watch one and be like, oh, I wish they'd drop this all at once. Because then you have to hear about that also. You can't just tell your spouse or your kids, I wish they dropped that. You can tell everybody on social media. You can reach out and ping everybody and say, so you don't have to hear that. Let's just drop this thing all at once. And that was the way to go with it.
It makes so much sense too, because the way some of the episodes ended, you're like, oh my gosh, skip credits, just go into the. I only watch like the intros to the first episodes and last episodes of anything, and so I did that with this. But the rest of the time we're like, no, skip credits, just go right to the next because it ends. And I would imagine and this is kind of I'm trying to trap you here. With future books and future series, you would probably do it the same way all at once and not, hanging everybody out week by week.
Yes, I think if there is a second season, then we'll do it. But I was just working on that this morning. So if we get that call from Amazon and they say, hey, it's a go, that we're ready. So I have this outline, another 8 episodes for book 2. But some things change now because in book 2, things are kind of hurtling towards this Russian invasion of Ukraine that might happen. And I wrote that book in 2016-17, came out in 2019. But now that's happened, so I can't use it as something that James Reese can avert somehow. Now I have to figure out another way to another geopolitical type of cataclysmic type event that things are rushing towards. So I need to figure that out. Yeah. That's the one that I'm trying to, because it made so much sense with the last book, but now that it's actually happened,
makes it a little different. Yeah, it's a little. That's a struggle for an author, I would imagine, particularly when you have your book already and now you got to get the teleplay done, and then oh my goodness. We're working with Chris Pratt. I thought Antoine Fuqua did a great job. He's one of my favorite directors. I love the stuff that he does. I think some of my movies like Training Day and the redo of Magnificent Seven, also starring Chris Pratt. Those are some of my favorite films because I love his just the pace at which he does his films and everything about it. This was a very serious role for Chris Pratt. When you were first initially, having all these conversations, I'm not sure at what level you play in having this. I mean, we all feel like we're experts because we saw The Offer. So we feel like we're experts about how movies are made now. But because he's played some really lighthearted characters, really funny characters. He has had some serious roles. This is, I think, by far his most serious role to date. It really showed another side of him, and he really was Reese. Talk to me about your feelings on that and how that came together.
Yeah, and he's shown everyone who just thought, oh, he can only do Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers and kind of campy-ish type character. They showed them that he can do anything. He has this range, and I knew it. I knew it well before Guardians of the Galaxy and Jurassic World and all that. I knew it back when I started typing this thing out in December of 2014, when he was only on Parks and Rec and played a very small role in Zero Dark 30 as a SEAL. Yes. So I saw that transformation, and I didn't want someone who had already done action movies before. I wanted someone new. I wanted kind of someone that was likable, that was funny, because you're going to maybe have to forgive him for a few things he was going to do. So if you go into it already liking him personally and professionally, but then see him do something new, then you have that kind of psychologically, you're already with him. So back in 2014, I thought that. And then my friend gave him a copy of the book before it even hit shelves. And I had no idea that I even had any connection to him whatsoever. But as I was typing, I was picturing him playing the role, and I was picturing Antoine directing. So even though I had no connection to publishing, and crazy. So I was picturing those two, and then my friend calls me to thank me for something I did for him in the SEAL teams 5 years prior, and I didn't remember what it was. And he said, as a thank you for that, I'd like to read your book and maybe give it to a friend of mine. And I said, no problem. Who's that? And he said, Chris Pratt. I said, oh, that's interesting. Very convenient for me because I pictured him playing this role as I was writing it. And I kind of thought of like Tom Hanks in the 80s doing all comedy and then taking a risk with Philadelphia in the early 90s and being able to do anything else after that. So I was kind of thinking along those lines, like, who's that person that needs to take a risk as an actor, that has this range, is inherently likable, and is the right age to pull this off and would want to do something like this, comfortable with weapons at the same time. That was very important. And then boom, that's Chris Pratt. And then my friend gave him the book. He read it in late December of 2017, called the first week in January of 2018 and wanting to option it. So called a week later. And then my other friend gave one to Antoine at the same time.
That's
and then Antoine,
wild.
And then they called each other and figured it out and said, let's do this together. And so now we're all three executive producers on it, and we had a fantastic time making it.
So in addition to writing books, you could also be a casting director too. I mean, that's what I'm pretty much hearing at this point.
The casting was interesting. Yeah, as an executive producer, I got to be involved in that and see how they did, especially during COVID when nothing was in person. Yeah. But you kind of already knew the people that you wanted for a lot of these roles, even though you had casting videos come in and all that sort of a thing. But I learned a lot this last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Learned a ton, that's for sure.
I really liked the relationship that Reese in the series had, because I was very interested to see who was going to be playing whom, and the character of Ben. And I don't want to give any. People need to watch it, so I don't have to worry about like spoiler alerts and all of this. Because at first, even reading the book, at first you're like, man, you need to find you a friend like him. Oh my gosh, no. And that's all I'm gonna say. It's because and you're right. You're so right with Pratt's likability, his amiableness, for the lack of a better way to put it. Because Reese is a dark character, man. Reese has got some baggage. But at the same time, he is the perfect anti-hero. He really is. And I think that if you didn't like the guy playing him, or he didn't seem likable, you'd really hate this guy. That could have been a gamble.
Exactly. No, I thought about that quite a bit as I was typing away in my little rental house in Coronado, California, during my last year in the SEAL teams. That was at the forefront of my thought process. But I never wasted time thinking like, oh, what if Chris Pratt doesn't take this role? What if Antoine Fuqua doesn't direct it? I never thought about that. As a child of the 80s, I was like, that's just how it's going to happen. You write a book, it becomes the #1 New York Times bestseller, and then A-list actor and director want to do it. And then you get your publisher who you want. It's Simon & Schuster, Emily Bessler in this case, who is amazing. And I saw her in the back of books by Brad Thor and Vince Flynn, and they're thanking her at Simon & Schuster. So I picked her as well before she knew who I was. Awesome. So it all kind of crazy how it all worked out.
One last quick question. Our friend Jack CARR, New York Times bestselling author behind The Terminalist, you make an appearance. I feel like this would have gone out very differently if because you and Reese kind of crosshairs, so to speak. I don't know. I feel like that would have been real different in real life. That's all. I mean, however you want to answer that, because my husband and I were like, no.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I made sure to tell Chris beforehand as we're blocking that scene that, hey, buddy, this is just make-believe. In real life, this would go down a lot differently, just so you know. So,
That's that.
He was
I love
under no
it.
illusions that it would not, but
Yes.
that was so much fun. That was so much fun to do. And it was crazy. The guy who stunt doubled me for the crash, they wouldn't let me do the crash. But the guy that stunt doubled me is the same guy that stunt doubled Mel Gibson jumping off the tower in Lethal Weapon back in the day when he's handcuffed to that guy.
Oh,
So
yes,
saw
I
Mel-
know that scene. Woo.
Yeah, it's so very impactful movie to me back in the day. And then I saw Mel Gibson at UFC. We went out there for a UFC thing. The Terminal List sponsored it and everything. But Mel Gibson was in the front row, a few seats down from me, so I got to tell him that, and he was fantastic. He said, "That's a great connection." He was just so cool. It was amazing to talk to him about that.
That's
So,
awesome. I love
they-
how all of this came
they let me
together.
do it. I got to do all the rest of it and see how they put the bullet holes in the glass when they're shooting and all that stuff. That was really interesting. Yeah.
I love this. And I'm so happy. I can't wait to see the next one, which I'm sure you will tell us as soon as it happens, because the first one, it's number 1 on Amazon Prime. It is the number 1 streaming series on Amazon Prime for good reason, and you gotta watch it. It's The Terminal List, starring Chris Pratt, written by Jack CARR. Congratulations, Jack. Here's the book too. And then, oh wait, don't forget, also get his latest, In the Blood, which was just released.
Amazing. Now there's a few out there with this guy on the cover.
I
Look at that
know.
guy.
Now you got the special ones. You got the special
That's
copies.
right.
Awesome.
That's
Jack
right.
CARR, Terminal List is the series. Go and binge it. Jack, always good to talk with you. Congrats, my friend.
Thank you so much for everything.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Take care.